Video games are a huge part of my life and so many of yours, so what are the best for me? Let's find out. So while I primarily dive into movies and TV shows here on the channel, gaming has actually been a huge part of my life. From getting my first console with the Super Nintendo back in the early 90s, through traveling the world competing in various games, to today, where I still play tons of games across PC, Xbox, PlayStation, Switch, and even my phone. I've spent my entire life playing the best the gaming world has to offer. I was incredibly fortunate to be able to compete professionally in gaming for a while. Nowadays, the developers pretty much run their own leagues, but back in the day, there used to be third-party leagues such as Major League Gaming or the World Cyber Games, both of which I was fortunate enough to travel around and play in, and actually found some success specifically with the World Cyber Games, or WCG for short. WCG was kind of like an Olympics for video games, and I was able to represent our country a couple of times in the late 2000s while I was finishing up college. So I've been ingrained in gaming my entire life, and I was even involved in esports before it really blew up to what it is today. So with all of that, let's jump in. Here are some of my favorite video games of all time, with plenty of honorable mentions at the end. Number 5 on the list is League of Legends. I actually fell in love with this game back in its beta phase. I knew someone who worked for Riot Games, and he let me and some of my gaming buddies play the beta, and it was a super fun game to play together. It's up there among the most fun multiplayer games I've ever played because of the fact everyone in the game very much has a role to play. I never really played Dota. I got into it more with League of Legends, and I really like it. I was always mid lane on our team, and each of us could very much focus on our individual lanes and building a team where each person had their part. I was never super good at it, honestly, but I did play the heck out of it from beta until around 2012, 2013, when I finally was in the workforce and couldn't devote a lot of time to it. But here's why it made the list. First, I think League actually has the best professional scene. I used to watch it a lot more than I do now, but I like the individual leagues for the different regions, and it's been fun to watch the North American League, the League Championship Series, evolve over the years. I remember watching names like TSM and CLG that aren't really around anymore, and teams like Cloud9 that are still around but have obviously evolved a ton over the last decade plus. I like that professional athletes and sports franchises as well as other major investors are getting into it, and I love their world championships more than any other game. I know it's dominated by Asian teams, and the best North America can usually hope for is to make it out of group stage, but it's still fun to watch. I do like the international with Dota 2, but I just enjoyed League as a whole more than Dota. Second, the game I probably play the most currently is actually Teamfight Tactics, which is pretty much a separate game, but it is playable through the League of Legends launcher and uses the same characters and items from the game, just in a different and unique way. I consider them basically the same game, which is why it ultimately made the move into the top 5. I really like the auto chess style of game, and it's just so easy to hop in and out of a match with the various modes within TFT. I also really like Arcane, and it's one of the best adaptations of any game to the screen, movie or TV. It's available on Netflix if you want to watch. I do highly recommend it. Number 4 on the list from 2006, it's Gears of War. Gears is a game I have a lot of affinity for. It came out in 2006 when I was in my early years in college, so I used my newly found college freedom to play the heck out of it. I like the story of the single player, and the gameplay across both single and multiplayer was very unique. It was a third-person shooter with a lot of tactical gameplay to it, and it used a cover system that we hadn't really seen much in gaming to that point. It led to a massive franchise with 5 main games to date and a few spin-offs as well. Gears 1 was also my introduction to competing in video games on a national stage, and that's what got me to finally travel and play in an MLG event. That ultimately led to me spending a few years competing in it and actually working for MLG in 2008, which actually led to me finding other leagues like WCG to play in as well. I actually probably like the gameplay of Gears 3 the best, but I honestly kind of fell out of love with the franchise in the last few years. Epic Games developed the game originally, but Microsoft eventually acquired the rights from them, and they passed it on to the Coalition for Gears 4 and 5, and I just wasn't as big a fan of those. I think the original 3 had a great story from beginning to end, and the gameplay was good in multiplayer as well. I know there's a new game coming out at some point in the future, but who knows if we'll ever actually get it. It would also make an awesome movie or TV show, but would probably cost a fortune to actually make and do it right. It's also ultra violent, since one of the main gimmicks of it is that you have a machine gun with a chainsaw on it that you use to slice the aliens up. A film has been in development hell since 2007 when New Line Cinema bought the rights for it, and then Universal was going to work on a movie after Gears 4 came out. Then in 2022, a film entered development with Netflix, but I think that's the last we've heard of it. Dave Bautista would be a perfect Marcus Phoenix, the main character. So make it happen, Netflix. Number 3 on the list is Halo 2 from 2004. While Gears was the game that actually got me out and traveling to play competitively, Halo was actually the first game I really got into competing against other people in, and then it ramped up even more with Halo 2, which was the first one available to play on Xbox Live. I loved Halo Combat Evolved and playing it with friends locally, but a whole new world was opened up with Xbox Live Online. It didn't make the list, but an honorable mention game for me has to be Rainbow Six 3, which is actually the first game I bought that I could play on Xbox Live. I played it nonstop competitively and made a bunch of friends through it and spent a ton of time on game battles playing it. That then led to me getting competitive in Halo 2 as well. I actually still have my little paper slip stuck in my wallet where I reserved Halo 2 at GameStop, and I went and stood in line for the midnight release on November 9th, 2004 to get the Steel Case Collector's Edition. I got all into the I Love Bees alternate reality game beforehand, and once I got the game, I spent every waking moment playing it. I think the battle rifle is one of the best weapons ever introduced to a game, and you also got to play as an elite with the Arbiter. You learned a ton more about the Flood and Gravemind and everything that made the Covenant tick as well. It was just an awesome experience. I did really enjoy Halo 3 as well, and that final level, racing the Warthog out as the most epic music of all time plays, is so awesome. It's all great. The entire trilogy is great. I enjoyed ODST as well, plus Reach and Halo 4. I wasn't wild about Halo 5, but then Infinite brought it back to where it needed to be, I think. I also really liked the TV show on Paramount Plus, and I hate that they canceled it. I'd love to see something else from that world as well. Number 2 on the list, this is a game I have been playing for over 20 years now, and I still play it now. And it's definitely the game I've played the longest, which is World of Warcraft, and it's hard to beat. We're currently in the 10th expansion and the 11th overall version of the game, and I've been playing since day one in Vanilla WoW. Hell, I could do a whole bunch of lists just on this game. I got into the game in Vanilla because it came out my senior year of high school, actually not long after Halo 2 came out. I had played Warcraft 3 a little bit, but I'd never been super into real-time strategy games. However, Warcraft 3 was one that kept my attention, and I fell in love with the lore of the Warcraft universe there. So when I first saw World of Warcraft demoed, I knew I had to play it. I played a little bit here and there for the first year or so until I went off to college in the fall of 2005, and that's when I finally leveled a character to 60 and then really got into it. The expansion I actually played the least was probably the first one, the Burning Crusade. It came out in January 2007, and I had just started playing college football that spring, so I didn't have as much time to dedicate to it. I did come back towards the end to get ready for Wrath of the Lich King, where I started playing a Death Knight, and I haven't looked back from that point. I played a rogue before, and it was fun, but something about Death Knight just felt right for me, and it started clicking, and I've been playing the game hardcore ever since. Some friends and I really got into Cataclysm and played it pretty heavily, and then really got into Mists of Pandaria, which is actually probably my favorite expansion so far. I also had a stretch there where I was unemployed for a bit, and so I did literally everything you could do in the game, and it's the only time I legit raided because, well, I had time. I've never been a hardcore raider, but there's still plenty to do in the game without having to race for world's first and everything. I kept playing pretty hardcore through Warlords of Draenor and Legion, and then backed off a bit for Battle of Azeroth because of a work conflict, but then COVID let me play it a ton towards the end of the expansion. Then I got into Shadowlands a lot because of still working from home during COVID, and I spent most of my work days playing WoW instead of working, but don't tell anybody. Then I enjoyed Dragonflight, and now we're at The War Within, which is all right. They've changed things up a bit, and The War Within is the first part of the World Soul Saga, which is a trilogy of expansions with The War Within first, and then Midnight and The Last Titan. So I'm interested to see where things go from here, and I love the stories within the world of Warcraft. I actually enjoy the movie as well. I know a lot of people didn't, but I guess I'm just enamored with the lore and all the stories, so I'm a little biased. I think the game is much easier to get into now, so if you haven't played it and are curious, there's no better time to jump in and enjoy. Finally, my number 1 game is something I'm kind of including the entire franchise as an honorable mention, but my favorite game in the Legend of Zelda series is Wind Waker. I feel like most people lean into Ocarina of Time or Breath of the Wild as their favorites, and Breath of the Wild is probably second for me, but I love Wind Waker and its art style, which may have been a little divisive for some people with its overly cartoony style, but I love the design of the game. I like the fact that the game took place kind of in the ocean and you had to sail between islands, and when I first played it, I was a little lukewarm on Tetra, and then it's like, oh man, that's Zelda, and there's a lot of cool reveals in it, and the music was incredible. I mean, the music was just awesome. Plus, it's like the cutest game ever, too. And I know that's weird coming from a guy who loves World of Warcraft with orcs and trolls beating the hell out of each other, and Gears of War where you're chainsawing monsters in overly violent ways, but this is a nice departure from all of that. We haven't gotten a direct sequel to it on console. They did do a couple on the Nintendo DS, but in the same way we had a direct sequel to Breath of the Wild with Tears of the Kingdom recently, I wish we'd have a good console follow-up to the Wind Waker. Ganon's always coming back in weird ways, so let's figure out something and do it, especially with where game systems are these days. I mean, to me, it sounds like a perfect game to release on the Switch too. So now let's get into some honorable mentions. First up, The Elder Scrolls Morrowind from 2002. This is the first open world game I really ever played. My youth director at church actually got me into it, and I was so enthralled with how free the gameplay in it was. I know that's nothing new now, and we've had Oblivion and Skyrim and even The Elder Scrolls Online, which are all good, but I love Morrowind the most, and it was the first game I remember getting into where your choices kind of sort of affected the world around you. And just the fact that you could make good and bad choices was cool. If you wanted to steal something, you could steal it, but you had to potentially deal with the consequences and stuff like that. I've never been a huge fan of the combat in Elder Scrolls games, but it doesn't really deter me much because there's so much to enjoy with it. My youth director actually also got me into Deus Ex, which is a pretty good game, and I really liked Invisible War. I played the games after that. I didn't have quite as much of an affinity as the first couple of games, but I loved Invisible War and the original Deus Ex as well. Another honorable mention is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic from 2003. I followed up my Morrowind playing with KOTOR, and I loved this one as well. I didn't really like the combat in this one either, since it kind of had like a D&D approach to damage and stuff, but I did love the story, and it was my first time to really play as a Jedi in a game. Plus, it came out in the midst of the prequel trilogy, so Star Wars was everything at the time. Another honorable mention is Guild Wars 2 that came out back in 2012. I actually haven't stuck with this game. I did play the first Guild Wars a decent amount, and Guild Wars 2 is a game I played a lot at first and then revisit from time to time when a new expansion or something comes out, but I actually was one of the first people to ever play this game. I was fortunate enough to get a chance to work with Samsung during my time as a gamer, and I got to go to CES and use the game to demo a line of Samsung SSDs almost 2 years before the game actually released in August of 2012. I got to help show it off at the convention and work with some ArenaNet people, so it was pretty cool. It definitely has a special place in my heart, even though I'm a World of Warcraft player through and through. I also had to include a sports game on the list for an honorable mention, and my favorite series to play, no doubt, is the NHL series. Even though I'm a football player, I play college football. It's not the NCAA series or now the new college football series or Madden. It's NHL. I've been a Nashville Predators fan since the inception of the franchise. Always got my Preds hat here to put on. And after playing the NHL series with some friends in the late 2000s, I really got to be a hockey fan. I think NHL has the best online team play of any sports game, and it's super fun to play. I haven't loved the latest versions as much as some of the ones I really got into around 2010 and 2011, but it's still a good time to play with people even today.
What moves? Look at John K thinking like he's gonna for us. Oh my God!
Another RPG that I really loved was Fable from 2004. It blew my mind. I love the first one and some of the coul stuff it did about being able to be good and bad and having, a more unique and longer lasting consequence to being good or bad than a game like Morrowind. It was a great version of kind of what we get with like Jedi and Sith now in the Old Republic or something like that. You could also marry people, you could buy houses, you could do all kinds of stuff on top of it being just a great adventure game. I probably like the original Fable a little more than 2 or 3, only because the magic and newness wasn't quite there in those, and I pretty much like the whole trilogy, except for the way it ends in Fable 3. If you've played it, basically the final part of the game is you have to raise a bunch of money to fund an army to save the town from an attack a year later, but in order to stash the money, you have to make bad decisions, and you can either be nice in the present or risk losing everything and everyone in the end, or rule with an iron fist in the present and save people but be hated at the end. It's kind of a no-win situation, at least on first playthrough, and I always try to be nice in games. I'm never one of those that's like, I'm going to be evil. I always try to be a nice guy in games, and after the battle, nobody was left in my town, so it was empty. Didn't really like that, so I didn't really want to keep playing after that. But we got a few spinoffs from the series, but I'm very much looking forward to an actual new Fable game, which is slated to come out in 2026 for now, but it's been in development for 7 years now. We got a trailer last year, but that's really all we have so far, and it looked good, but I'll believe it when we see it. What kind of led to me making this video, though, is another honorable mention, and that is Minecraft, which the movie comes out in theaters in a few weeks. I do actually really like Minecraft, but it's not a game I revisit a ton. I like playing with other people so you can develop a world together, but a lot of the people I play with have kind of fallen out of playing it. But the technology and the perceived simplicity of the game is what makes it so great. It's the best-selling video game of all time for a reason, and even though the movie looks awful, I do feel obligated to go see it opening night because it is such a good game. And of course, when it comes out, I'll have a review here, and I hope I'm pleasantly surprised. Another game I very much enjoy, and it's one of the most popular games right now, is Fortnite. I actually like the save the world aspect of Fortnite, and obviously they've added so much on top of the original Battle Royale mode that made it blow up. I like playing zero build because I'm terrible at building and I'd rather just play the shooter aspect of it. But they now have Lego Fortnite, which is kind of like a Minecraft Lego Fortnite weird offspring. They have Rocket Racing, which is a fun racing spinoff of Rocket League and Fortnite. They have Fortnite Festival, which is kind of like Rock Band. And they now have Ballistic, which is kind of a Counter-Strike style spinoff of Fortnite. It's a giant game. It continues to be wildly popular, and I do enjoy playing it. And I love the collaborations they have with the skins you can buy and stuff also. I only wish there was like a really good 25-person battle royale instead of 100 people, so it didn't last quite as long. One thing in gaming with me nowadays is that I like to have time to just jump in really quickly, and it probably has to do with shortening attention spans for everybody, but I like the option of having a long-form version of a game and a short-form version of the same game. That's kind of why I like Teamfight Tactics so much. I can play a legit ranked game and it lasts, 30 to 45 minutes, or I can play a hyper roll game and it's done in 15 minutes. You also have to give some respect to games like Mario, Pokemon, Donkey Kong, and Kirby, and all the other great Nintendo franchises and what they did for gaming. But my best iteration of something from the world of Nintendo, outside of Zelda, has to be Super Smash Bros. Bringing all your favorite characters to beat the hell out of each other, that sounds great. It's also an incredible game, and nobody that has tried to copy the formula has been successful really yet. So I have to give credit where credit is due for Smash and what it's been able to accomplish from the Nintendo 64 until now. I also don't really get into games like Final Fantasy, and I haven't mentioned games like Metal Gear Solid or Metroid or Castlevania, but Smash has even included characters from all of those games as well. And while we're on Nintendo, I don't necessarily love the Animal Crossing franchise, but I mentioned WoW getting me through COVID, but my wife and I played the heck out of some Animal Crossing too, so I have to give some love there. I also have to give some love to Half-Life and all of its offspring. It's kind of the father to a lot of games and ideas we have now. It led to Counter-Strike, which is still super popular, and you can look at games like Call of Duty that kind of spun off that. It led to Team Fortress, which led the way to hero shooters like Valorant, Overwatch, and Marvel Rivals now. It led to Portal, which is one of the most fun puzzle games to play. And Half-Life and Half-Life 2 are just themselves good games. I'd love to see a legit Half-Life movie, and I doubt we'll ever get it or ever get Half-Life 3, but it definitely is a game to put on the list. There are a lot of other really good games, and I could go on and on naming off some of my favorites. The good thing with gaming is, whether it's an RPG on your favorite console, a first-person shooter on your PC, or even a mobile puzzle game on your phone, there's something for everybody. Let me know your favorites in the comments below, plus make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more pop culture picks, movie and TV reviews, and so much more.